Hey folks, welcome back. So today we're going to talk about ex-Director of Secret Service, Kimberly Cheatle. It's been a rough week for old Cheatle. Tuesday of this week, she officially resigned as Director of Secret Service. Later, Cheatle. And then the day before that, on Monday of this week, she testified in front of Congress for 5 straight hours. And it was pointless. Absolutely and completely pointless. Millions of people tuned in for answers. Cheatle had gone on and on about being transparent and being an open book and delivering answers to the public. And it was the big day. Everybody was there waiting for answers. Really, Cheatle, what the hell happened? How could this possibly happen? And for 5 hours straight, Cheatle sat in the chair and didn't answer anything. To the point where it became absurd. If you do the non-answer thing for 2 hours straight, and everybody knows you're not going to answer any questions, and there's still 3 hours to go, it makes the whole thing feel ridiculous. And there were funny moments, and there were frustrating moments. Probably my favorite moment is one of the congresswomen pressed her and said, "Cheatle, you didn't even bring in a timeline with you today? We're all here. This is the big day. You were talking about transparency and you didn't bring in a timeline." And Cheatle said, "I brought in a timeline just with no specifics on it." Cheatle, a timeline without specifics is just a line. You brought in a blank line. We're all here. It's the big day, and you bring in a blank line? Should we put the blank line up on the screen and just stare at it? What were you hoping to do with your line? That actually deserves a Brooksian slide. I brought in a timeline, but there's no specifics. I thought a blank line would help. All right, so let me set up the circumstances that led to Cheatle sitting in the chair for 5 hours, not answering any questions, because they're almost as fascinating as anything that happened during the testimony. And then we're going to go through a timeline because kind of funny. So Cheatle didn't bring in any information. Apparently, the Secret Service's investigation hasn't come up with anything yet. She had no results from any type of Secret Service investigation. But unfortunately for her, the FBI did do an investigation. So all of the congressmen and women, they're armed with the results of the FBI investigation. So they can say, "That's great, Cheatle, you brought in a blank line and you got no answers." Well, I got some questions from the FBI investigation. And Cheatle she never disagreed with the results of the FBI investigation. She just didn't answer anything. But it's not like the congressmen, they each get 5 minutes to grill her. And also, it's notable, most issues are really partisan, right? Divided right down the party line. So when you have someone go in there and take a beating for 5 hours, a lot of times because it's divided right down the party line, either one side is easy on the person, or one side, most of the congressmen and women don't even show up because it's not there. They're not trying to put anything on record if they don't want the person to look bad. But this one, it was totally bipartisan. Both sides of the aisle were demanding answers and demanding her resignation straight to her face. So she didn't have half of the aisle being easy on her or not showing up. Pretty much every congressman and woman, which rarely happens, was there and ready to grill Cheatle. So she didn't even get a break. And I was thinking, man, such a historic failure. It actually united the country. I love stories like that. We are all united for a day or two because of Cheatle's colossal failure. That's another thing, is words like colossal and historic are being used to describe the failure. That's rough. We're all going to have failures in life, big, small, but once words like colossal and historic are being used to describe your failures, you know it's not going well. But let's go back a little bit. Right after the attempted assassination, she made the infamous line that the reason that there was no one up on the perfect assassination roof is because it was sloped. And let's just get the quote. This is kind of where my last video ended, so it's a good, I think, starting place. I think that she regrets the sloped roof answer, and I think at that point her mind was going so crazy that she was thinking, I'm just gonna make this answer to get through kind of an awkward interview, not realizing I'm the director of Secret Service. Anything that I answer is gonna become the statement and is going to be put under a microscope. But in an ABC interview right after the attempted assassination, they asked her, why wasn't someone up on that roof that has the perfect line of shot? It seems like a no-brainer. Why wouldn't someone be up on the roof? And she answered, quote, that building in particular has a sloped roof at its highest point. And so, there's a safety factor that would be considered there, that we wouldn't want to put someone up on the sloped roof. Well, hilariously, since she said that, they measured the slope, and it's so gradual that it actually meets ADA guidelines to what's considered safe for someone in a wheelchair. So if there's a Secret Service agent that's in a wheelchair, it would have even been safe for them to be up on that roof. They wouldn't have careened up, and then off the side and splat. They would have been up there totally safe. Hey, the slope's not that bad. The roof is secure. So I thought that was pretty funny. Then 2 days after or maybe 2 or 3 days, I'm not sure, but they must have asked Director Cheatle, hey, do you want to come in and testify in front of Congress? You had said you're going to be transparent. You want to come in? And she must have said no, because many of the congressmen said to her, we had to subpoena you to come in. You went on and on about being an open book and transparent, and then we had to subpoena you. So at some point they asked her. She either just didn't respond or declined, and then they're like, all right, well, we'll subpoena you. And so they subpoena her. Part of the subpoena is they asked her to bring in all of the names of the law enforcement personnel that were working that day, all audio and visual evidence that was taken, all memos, Secret Service memos before and after, and all Secret Service communications. She didn't bring in any of it. And so, as you can imagine, during the 5-hour testimony, you didn't bring in any of the stuff, the timeline's blank, the Secret Service communications. That'd really be enlightening and help. Where is all this stuff? And Cheatle just said there, I appreciate your question, and so here, you might be thinking, if you didn't watch it, how do you not answer any questions for 5 hours? Well, it's not a great look, but here was Cheatle's main strategies. I wrote some of the phrases she used over and over again to the point of absurdity down. Here's some of them. So they'd ask her a question, Cheatle, why didn't you didn't bring any of the stuff, and you're just not going to answer any of the questions? You're going to sit there for 5 hours? And she would go, I appreciate your question. It's like, Cheatle, you're getting grilled without mercy. You don't appreciate the questions. You don't look like you appreciate the questions. You're wasting time. No one wants to hear you say, I appreciate the question every time. Just get into it. So that was one of her things. I appreciate the question. And one of my favorites is anything to have to do about the times things happen. She would say, I'm still verifying the timelines. That's a good one. If your boss comes up to you and goes, what's the deal? You've been late 10 times this month. You could just say, yeah, well, sorry, pal. I've been verifying my timelines, and my investigation will be done in 60 days. That's the other thing. Cheatle just referenced 60 days over and over again. Yeah, that the Secret Service investigation's not done yet. It's going to take 60 days. 60 days this. Oh, sorry, not going to know that one for 60 days. And just coincidentally, we're all here. Everybody's tuned in today, but we got 2 months. The testimony was 9 days after the event, and so a lot of the congressmen and women were saying, it's been 9 days and you have nothing? Nothing? Okay, so she would say, oh yeah, this is maybe one of my favorites too. She would they would ask her a question and she'd say, I'll have to get back to you on that. Why? What does that mean? We're all here now. What do you mean get back to me on that? How is that going to look? I was picturing just some congresswoman from New Mexico. It's 3 months later. The news cycle has changed. We're on to thinking about other stuff. She's having a hectic weeknight, getting dinner on the table for her family, and then the phone rings. All right, hold on a second. You guys just start dinner. I'm going to see who that is. And answers the phone. Hello? Yes, is this the congresswoman from New Mexico? Yeah? Who is this? Hey, sorry, it's Cheatle. Well, if you remember months ago during my testimony in front of Congress, you had asked me a couple questions and I had told you I'll have to get back to you. Yeah, I remember that. It was really frustrating because that was the day that we were trying to figure it out, and I didn't really even understand what that meant. Yeah, sorry about that. Well, here I am. I'm going to give you some of the information that you were asking for. Well, Cheatle, it doesn't really help now. The whole thing about the testimony is to give Americans the answer. Just telling me right now, that's not like the point. All right, well, I'll see you later. Goodbye, Cheatle. So that was a funny one to me. I'll have to get back to you on that. She was saying that during Congress, like as they're just neighbors. Hey, I'll get back to you. See you later. Pretty funny. All right, let me see anything else. Verify the timeline. Oh, another answer that she would always use is she goes, I think those are answers that need to be determined. Yeah, that's you, Cheatle. Appreciate the question. All right, so that's how she dodged questions. And if you're thinking, man, that must have been brutal and totally ridiculous, it was. Over and over again, she's using those phrases. And the congressmen and women, as it gets later in the thing, so if you go in the first couple, it's the first time she uses these answers, but by the time you get hours and hours in and she's not answering anything, and you have the same questions that 3 congressmen asked to go and she didn't answer. So as it got deeper in, the congressmen and women would kind of just improvise. They know she wasn't going to answer questions. So one of them said, do you want to just use my 5 minutes that I was going to question you to draft your resignation letter? And in a meek voice, Cheatle goes, no, thank you. And she ended up resigning the next day anyway. But the brutal calls to resign that's a rough thing to go through because everybody would ask her their questions. She wouldn't answer them. And then most of them would use the last 10 to 20 seconds of their 5 minutes to say, well, you didn't answer any questions. All of this is ridiculous. You've only added more uncertainty and bizarreness to the whole thing. I call for you to immediately resign. And she just goes, I appreciate your question. I'll have to verify my timelines. So 60 days, we should know. But like I said, there has been an investigation. The FBI did an investigation and put it out, making Cheatle and the Secret Service look even more bad. And the picture that the FBI investigation paints is that local law enforcement was all over it. You'll see like an hour before Trump even took the stage, local law enforcement had deemed Crooks suspicious. Then a time later, they see him with the rangefinder and note that. They're radioing their concerns. They're sending pictures to the Secret Service. At no point does the local law enforcement seem like they dropped the ball, because the story is inside the event, like the actual event where the speech is happening, that was Secret Service. And then right outside the event, which is still, in my opinion, part of the event with the parking and how they funnel people out, but right outside where the actual speech and event is happening, then local law enforcement was handling that area, but the way I understand it, still answering to the Secret Service. And so like I said, the FBI's report comes out, and at no point does it seem like local law enforcement did anything sketchy, could have done anything better. The FBI's report really paints a picture. I wasn't left going, come on, FBI, that's the report you released. This is nothing. Doesn't feel like that. Feels like a good, thorough report. And so here we are, and it's just the old Secret Service that still is looking really bad and bizarre and isn't satisfying anybody with the answers of how did this happen. But let's start the timeline because it's pretty interesting. So July 3rd, the Trump rally is announced. 3 days later, on July 6th, the shooter, Crooks, searches for Trump dates. The next day, on July 7th, Crooks went out to the site to explore and look around. If you watched my last video on it, I was wondering about that. I was thinking, there's no way the day of, right before the event, he drove there and just figured the whole thing out. So that was interesting to hear. And let's see, 5 days later, on July 12th, he went to the gun range and practiced shooting. The next day, the 13th, the day of the shooting, he went out to the site of the rally that morning and allegedly, I don't know if this has been deemed a fact yet, but allegedly flew a drone around. And at that point, Secret Service and law enforcement are out there. So a congressman, very heated, asked Cheatle a question. Was he allowed to fly a drone around and get aerial shots of the event that morning? And of course, Cheatle didn't answer and just did a non-answer and said, I appreciate your question, but I need to verify my timelines. And okay, we're going to keep moving. Okay, this is where it starts to go. Oh, so we went out there that morning, maybe flew a drone, we're not even sure. Then he goes back to his place an hour away, goes and buys the ammunition, goes and buys a 5-foot ladder from Home Depot and asks his dad if he can use the gun. The interesting thing about the ladder is, so he goes and buys the ladder. The ladder, there's a picture of him dead on the roof with his rifle sitting right there. And in the picture, you can see 2 ladders, a small one that's like way down the building, far away from where he ended up, and then a tall one. And I haven't heard verification. Did he use the ladder he bought at Home Depot? Still haven't heard a definite answer on that, but there is that picture. And so it's almost either way, it's totally bizarre. So either he used his ladder and was allowed to be walking around with a rifle-shaped backpack and a ladder. Don't worry about me. I'm good. I'm not suspicious. So either he was allowed to walk around with the ladder and use it, or maybe even weirder, if he didn't use his ladder, there just happened to be a perfectly unguarded, perfectly placed ladder that happened to go straight up to the bizarrely unsecured roof that happened to be the perfect close shot to assassinate Trump. So either one of those, if he was allowed to use his own ladder, or if there was just a perfectly placed ladder, not even guarded, that goes right up to the unsecured roof. Better not have anyone within miles of it. So either way, all right, so here's where things start to really happen. At 5 p.m., the fateful day, this is exactly an hour and 11 minutes before the shots rang out. Local law enforcement made aware and flagged Crooks as a suspicious person. So like I said, law enforcement, it doesn't feel like after you look at this FBI report that they could have really done anything else. Here we are an hour and 11 minutes before the shooting, and they've already, quote, flagged Crooks and deemed him a suspicious person. Okay, 10 minutes later at 5:10, still more than an hour before the shooting, Crooks is observed by the sniper. So as far as the FBI's report, the sniper, now we have the law enforcement has flagged and deemed him suspicious, and the sniper with the Secret Service has seen him. Okay, 10 minutes later at 5:20 p.m., local law enforcement flagged that he had a rangefinder. So every step of the way, they were just following along, wondering, like, are they gonna like do anything about this dude? And so he's seen with the rangefinder. At that point, the local law enforcement radioed their concern and sent around pictures of Crooks. 8 minutes later, at 5:28, the sniper with the Secret Service takes a picture of the bike and the bags that Crooks had. So bikes, I guess, are not allowed at the rallies, and big bags aren't. And he had both of those, and a picture was taken. 5 minutes later, 5:32, sniper sees him on his phone and the rangefinder. About 15 minutes later, at 5:45, emergency services unit, which is also part of the local law enforcement, the way I understand it, noticed Crooks is now on the roof, and they photographed him on the roof. 6 minutes later, at 5:51, Secret Service was notified of Crooks' suspicious person by the state police. So you're having different sections, I guess, I don't know what they're called, of local law enforcement. You have the emergency services unit going, Secret Service, what about this guy? He's on the roof. Then you have the state police going, this guy is suspicious. Why is no one doing anything? And even though all of that, he had been deemed flagged and deemed suspicious, and many people had radioed concern and sent out pictures, for whatever reason, the event was not paused or stopped. And then even harder to imagine, at 6:03, Trump took the stage. 6 minutes later, that's when people at the rally saw Crooks on his stomach, getting ready, settling in and aiming with the gun. That's at 6:09. They're starting to beg the cop inside for someone to do something. And then 2 minutes later, the shots rang out. And everybody saw that. Also, something that I haven't gotten verification on, whether it's fact or not, is the explosives. They're saying he had explosives in his car, and one of the congressmen asked Cheatle, did he have explosives on or by a major gas line? And of course, she didn't answer, but that's another weird one, right? And one of the parts that got absurd in her testimony is they're going through that timeline. All of them have that timeline and are just using it to grill her. And she's going, I'll have to verify my timelines. And at this point, our investigation is 60 days away, and at 60 days this. And they're going, why was he observed on the roof and nothing happened? And her answer for that is there's a difference between a suspicious person and a threat. At no point was he deemed suspicious, but it took too long apparently to deem him as an official threat, and that's why it was able to happen. And that almost looks like, if you think about what it would take for that to happen, it almost seems like a comedy routine. I picture Cheatle a short distance away at some command center peering through comically huge binoculars, and her assistants by her side, and her assistants going, Director Cheatle, we have heard on the radio that there is a suspicious man milling around right by the unsecured roof that's a perfect shot to assassinate the former president. And Cheatle's going, okay, yep, I see it. Just suspicious. Director Cheatle, do you think we should deem it a threat at this point? No. I think just suspicious. Then a short time later, Director Cheatle, he now has a rangefinder out and looks like he is trying to set up how far straight to the podium. Should we deem it a threat? No. Just a rangefinder. He's probably just going to see if he's going to have a good view or not. Nope, just suspicious. Short time later, Director Cheatle, apparently he is on his stomach with a rifle out, pointed at the crowd. All right, that's simply suspicious. Some people, that's how they enjoy political rallies. Just suspicious at this point. Director Cheatle, a firefighter is dead, and the subject, Trump, he got shot in the head. Director Cheatle. Threat. Okay, threat. We got a threat. Deem it as a threat. Like, it was comically too late. You couldn't have better work from the local law enforcement out there. An hour and 11 minutes before it even happened, they had him flagged. They had pictures of him. They were radioing their concerns. It was so preventable. And the thing about admitting that it was a colossal failure and a historic failure, that's what I think Cheatle thought. If you watch her opening statement, it seems like she went in there thinking, I'm going to go in there, and instead of trying to hide that it was a failure, I'm going to just admit it and say this was a colossal historic failure, and that's me being transparent. The problem with that is that's the one thing everybody already knows. And if you've already gone through the embarrassment and the humiliation of admitting that what happened when I was in charge was a historic failure, after that, there's not really, if you can just be, unless you're hiding something, why not go in there and just say, yeah, we almost put someone up there, and then me and this other person decided, you know what, it's so hot that day, let's just keep an eye on, or whatever it is. Normally, if someone goes and testifies in front of Congress, that's what they're trying to hide by doing the non-answer thing, is that it was a historic failure. It was already admitted that it was a historic failure. So the fact that she is still hiding something starts to feel very suspicious, right? And let me see if I have anything else. Let's see how long I've been going, 26 minutes. All right, real quickly, this made me think of a story. This is probably the most insane assassination attempt out of all of them that I've ever heard. Like I said, I've been kind of fascinated by this type of stuff for a long time, but it made me think in 1936, there was this guy named Georg Elser, and he is a German living in Germany, and he in 1936, so the war was just about getting started, he had thought to himself, Hitler is bringing us towards total war, and I don't think we should do that again. I'm going to try to assassinate Hitler. And Elsler's upbringing really is an interesting part of the story. So when he was young, he worked with his dad in the timber industry, and then he got really good at woodworking and was doing carpentry, and then he went to trade school and graduated by far at the top of his class. He was really handy and really crafty, and then he became a carpenter, like a real deal professional carpenter, and he made dollhouses, and he made really elaborate, cool looking furniture. And then bizarrely, he ended up, his friend got him a job at a clock factory in Switzerland. So, Swiss clocks are no joke. So he's building houses for clocks, and he's actually even building the actual clocks. And at one point, the clock factory changed owners or something. But anyway, they didn't have money to pay him, so they paid him in clock gears and cogs and stuff, things that you would use, nice stuff to build a clock. So he had this stuff. But anyway, so that's his upbringing. Really crafty, handy, worked in a clock factory, builds furniture, the whole thing. And so he decides he wants to kill Hitler. And it made me think of this story because his first idea was he was going to shoot Hitler, but then he deemed that pretty much impossible. He's like, there's no way I'm going to be able to get close enough. It's kind of funny. It's here we are years later, and we're having a 20-year-old just get right up there, have time to settle down, take an aim. But he deemed that getting a shot off on Hitler would just be impossible. And so he was thinking, what else could I do? And he decided Hitler gave a speech every year at this beer hall, I think in Munich. So what he decided is he was going to build a bomb and then put it in the pillar right behind Hitler. And during the speech, with all that, you'd have to be a Nazi to get into the speech and watch. So while Hitler's giving his speech, the bomb goes off, explodes Hitler all over the audience. And he needed explosives, and his first strategy to acquire the explosives to build the bomb is he worked for a factory that was building weapons and stuff for the war. So they were ramping up for war. So everybody, like a bunch of factories, started building the weapons you need for war. So he gets a job there. He steals a little bit of explosive powder here, and he steals it there, and he's able to do it, but by far not enough. It's not going great. So then he gets a job at a rock quarry that uses explosives to blow out the side of the mountain and then continue, getting the rocks. And so he thought, all right, I'm going to work here for a while. I'm going to get him to trust me, and then hopefully I'll be able to steal some explosives. And to his surprise, he walked over to the shed where they keep all this explosives and opened it, and it was just wide open, and it turned out to be incredibly easy to steal the explosive. So he stole explosives and the detonators and the fuses and pretty much everything he needed to build this bomb. So he starts to build it, and he builds a bomb. It's not easy. If you watch documentaries on the Unabomber and stuff, it took him years before they were actually even strong enough to do anything, and he'd write in his journal, not powerful enough, or it didn't work, or it's not the easiest thing in the world. And Essler was able to do it, and he builds this bomb, and then he even, using his cogs and everything that they had given him while he was working at the clock factory, he built a homemade timer. I mean, this is like high-level stuff. And then once he built the bomb with the timer, and he actually built 2 clocks to make sure it was going to be accurate and go off at the right time. And after he built it, in my opinion, almost became the hardest part, because he had to go to the beer hall, hang out while everyone's dancing and partying, and then somehow for I think a week straight, or maybe even more, he would have to hide, and the staff cleans up. Somehow he hid in there, and then when the staff left, he would work for hours on the pillar, and then in the morning he would hide again, and then it would open and people would be busy again, and then he'd walk out. And that alone, not getting caught, where a staff member is mopping and going, hey, who is this guy? There's a guy sitting here. Who is this guy? And the pillar, this is where all of his master carpentry comes in. It was a wood outside of the pillar, and then the pillar itself was solid concrete. So night after night, first he had to cut an opening in the giant pillar, in the wood part, and he did it to make it look like it had always been there, and he put hinges on it so it was a little door, and then he had to, like Shawshank Redemption style, dig out a cavity that would fit the bomb. It didn't fit at first, so he had to come back like another night. He finally got it in, and then so it's in there ticking away, and he came in another night or two just to open it back up, see if the clocks are right. Yep, okay, it should be good. He set it for days in advance, and then it's the big night. Hitler actually gets there early, and they say because Hitler had to get back and plan the war. Who really knows? But what ended up happening is Hitler got there early. Usually it would be a 2-hour speech, but he cut it so he could get out of there and get back to wherever they were going. And so I don't know what the exact minutes is. I've heard 13, I've heard 15, but Hitler and all of his guys left about 15 minutes early. The bomb does go off, kills 8 people and injures 60-something. Pretty wild story. There's also another assassination of a Japanese head of state that's wild, where it's like his right-hand man, totally out of the blue. No one saw it coming. They're sitting there. He just pulls out a gun. The head of state's going, what are you doing? Just shoots him. And then the gun jams, so the head of state just has to lay on the ground going, why? Why did you do it? And he has to go get another gun and come back, and just brutal. But these stories are always just wild. And this one is no different. So apparently now it's 60 days for the Secret Service's big investigation to come out. I'm not holding my breath. We'll talk about it when it does. I'm going to cut it off there. I love you all. Why? Stiven Y. Shamita. Make sure to verify your timeline.